My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sankaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. I started last week the science of Kundalini meditation. I gave a brief history of the Kundalini meditation, how it goes back to thousands of years, and how it has evolved over time. You can see it in many scriptures, not just the Hindu scriptures, but also you see it in, the Chinese scriptures and many other scriptures. They call it different name, but the Sanskrit and in the a lot of Hindu traditions, you'll see Kundalini appearing in many scriptures. So I spoke about that, and then I spoke about how Mahan, used this technique to help us discover the life force. We all have a life force. That's what powers our life. But the mind is so focused on the material world, and for many people, they're just so focused from the time they, conception taken place, they completely respond to the material world, even in the mother's womb. And once the baby comes out, it's continuous bombardment of the material world, and the senses become more and more attuned to the material world. Ultimately, the senses and the mind becomes wedded and welded to the material world. So when the mind and the senses become wedded and welded to the material world, with all its limitations and all those ups and downs, the mind too experiences all those sukha, dukkhas, cause and effect, the karmic forces, and so on. So the conditioning of the mind on the material body and the senses and the experiences, it becomes to some extent sealed to the material world, and it is impacted. So these great saints and sages then had this idea that if a creator, what would the creator look like? Or the characteristics of the creator? And we discussed that in the earlier clips where, formless, dimensionless, timeless. The moment you remove time, there is no birth and death and all those things. So we know that there is a creator. The name creator comes from the ability of the substratum to create, manifest as many things. So this creator that we call God is formless, dimensionless, timeless, colorless, right? So when there's no time, there is no birth nor death, right? So this, you can call it the creator or the substratum. And I also discuss how our universe came into being because of infinite possibilities. So one of the possibilities is our universe, which is the four-dimensional universe. I think if you refer back to the earlier YouTube clips and the writings, it should be there. So what we then, the Mahans did was that they said, okay, if I want to know the creator, I have to know the creation process. And I want to know how the creation has taken place. That means I want to know how the mind was constructed, how thoughts form, what causes thoughts to be in such a way. And then they started examining the mind and the intellect, and then the body and the sensory perceptions and all the experiences. So they started transforming their body, mind, and intellect as a laboratory of analysis, right? And slowly, they realized that there are layers in us, like how an ocean is at the surface level, there's a lot of turbulence. As you go deeper and deeper, you see that the turbulence disappear, and there is very high current, which has its own flow. In that same way, when the mind is always at the surface level, it's caught up by turbulence. As it goes deeper and deeper, a sense of serenity, a sense of quietude that dawns upon the mind, and ultimately the mind attains that spiritual self-realization. So this is how the great saints, like a detective, saw how, so they realized that the mind is powerful, and the construction of our body and our own personality is based on the mind that is constructing, based on the mind that is responding to the material universe, learning, relearning, unlearning. Eventually, it forms its own personality, a material personality, a material identity. But when the great saints started separating this out, they realized that the mind is so powerful that the mind itself, in its true state, is transcendental to the material world. So using that logic, they went back and started exploring the mind more deeper. So they initially started off with the acharas, the rituals. Eventually, they slowly weaned off from the rituals as the mind was becoming more and more peaceful and calm. And eventually, the mind realizes it's a subtle substratum and not a gross substratum. It goes deeper and deeper. So we covered that. So I spoke about in the last class about the life force, the awakening of the spiritual energy, the ability to create an optional thought. So our thoughts are running everywhere. So the gurus teach you how to focus your mind on some inner vibrations, and that's what we mean by optional thought. And that brings in a sense of peace, tranquility, silence. The mind is not perturbed by all the thoughts and the worries. It becomes more and more calmer, peaceful. When that happens, there's a clarity of thought. When the clarity of thought comes, we see that our mind now transforms, uplifts itself to a higher order that is beyond its own material identity. And the mind discovers the spiritual compass, how to live an enlightened life. So the mind will gravitate towards things that makes it expanded, inspirational, and the mind will retreat from, itself if the mind is caught up in all the material, sukha, dukkha's, challenges in life. So the spiritual compass that these great saints have developed, whether it's mantra yoga, or Kundalini yoga, or Kriya yoga, all these techniques are spiritual compass for people to live an enlightened life. They must not be impacted by this material world. So we covered this. So how is this related to, as I spoke earlier in the previous satsangs and also in the writings, that everything emanated from a universe that was formless, dimensionless, and then took form. And I gave you the rationale for that. I'm going to show you pictorially what that Kundalini is. As I said before, the Kundalini vibration is the remnants, or it's called life force, is the remnants of the Big Bang that took place, that released electromagnetism throughout the universe. And everything in this universe that require vibration, and the vibration depends very much on electromagnetic force fields. It goes into very minute kind of energy fields that ultimately you see that, that spiritual compass helps you to navigate to that space where the mind becomes more calmer, more peaceful, the body becomes healthier, and ultimately, both your gross body, your mind, and your intellect all unifies to be able to understand that you are God packaged differently, right? So this is what we covered the last time, right? And that leads us to that spiritual compass that I spoke about the last time. So now I want to show you how, like a detective, you have to trace back that creative force. This is what Mahan did, to understand the big universe, where it came from. So you see in his chapters, he starts off with God, the concept of God and nothingness. So he's telling us that, understand the gross universe first and what makes it, what constitutes it, and then trace it back to you, which is what I'm going to do today. So what we saw was that in this context, we see that, there is this higher order, which is, sometimes Mahan calls it nothingness. I mean, it's the absence of matter and energy. It's a higher order continuum, higher than what our universe is. and it's formless, dimensionless. So the moment you say and timeless, that means that when time is not there, this state of nothingness, exists. So from this is where everything emerged, this primordial dot, and I'm going to show you this, you see. So the higher order continuum is the God substratum, or the God, Higgs calls it God particle, right? So this state of absence of materiality, the remnants of that is in us. It happens in deep sleep, it happens in coma, it happens when you're on anesthetic, it happens when we die, right? So this is the original base. This is called the samadhi phase, right? And from this emerge, vibrations, strings, now the scientists call it string theory. There's multiple strings that they resonate and vibrate. So this universe that is created in the three-dimensional space and time, had various conditions that allow for sounds or molecules to vibrate because there's time. And you see that leads to vibration. They call it string theory. Every vibration has its own characteristics, right? So this is what Swamiji says, Unarva Gavanipa. That means that, focus on that vibration. That means when the mind is out there, focus on that vibration, inner vibration. You may ask the question, how do I do it? I have never learned this. Yes, this is why you need a guru to guide you on how to feel that vibration. So it takes a little bit of an effort. It's like we don't know how to do calculation, so you go to a guru and teaches you multiplication, right? Once you learn the multiplication, then you can go and use that in your shops and so on. In the same way, Guru Mahan taught us that there is this greater expansive universe that is dimensionless, timeless, yet it creates. He says nothing, something by chance, right? To create this universe where you have vibration, right? So we see this evolution from formless now to form in the form of strings and vibrations and so on. And that remnants of this vibration is reverberating in us in the form of the life force and Kundalini, right? So what we see here is that leads to light. So these vibrations lead to light. Quarks is a smaller than building blocks of our universe, right? Now you start seeing, various chemicals being formed, the quarks, building blocks of that, you see light radiation, right? All this is going to be very important when we start practicing that meditation. You can actually feel these. You saw the basic elements being formed, very important. And then we saw the proton led to, we have the neutrons and, and we saw atoms started forming. This is the atoms of molecules and atoms of suns and planets, and all those things started taking place, including the human cell. So we see that there's an evolution from the nothingness state to the vibration phase to light phase to now atomic phase, right? So, and then what happens is that we see this evolution tracing it back. We see that leads to we humans. We are also part of that collective, material mind that is anchored on that material body. So we see that cells leads to human beings, consciousness, and so on, right? So there's an evolution that the cosmic symphony of the Bhagavan's Gita is embedded everywhere in the universe, including in us. So this is where the great saints say, okay, that means that I should be able to feel, if God is that vibration, then I should be able to feel the vibration, right? My brain should feel it. As the brain embraces it, the mind becomes enlightened and elevated. Our intellect becomes sharper. So we see this continuum that is cutting through everything in this universe, including us. This is what we call the cosmic intelligence of the big I, cosmic symphony that is happening. You're oblivious to it if you are so focused on that material world. So this is the first channel that Mahan saw that, yes, from that nothingness, there are a set of conditions that was put in our universe, and that conditions, as it became, gained traction, we saw vibrations, quarks, lights, atomic, cellular, and ultimately even the cellular started coming together to form molecules to form the human body. But what I want to tell you why this is relevant to Kundalini is the life force. Without that life force, existence would not be possible, right? So this life force comes from all the things that I just spoke about, the vibrations, quarks, protons. So cells are complex proteins that have all these elements in there. As it becomes more and more complex, it becomes a fly, a worm. So these are basic building blocks, 1 cell, 2 cell. Over time, we became, knowledge creators, and we use knowledge. Remember the orang asli, or the indigenous population, how they create fire, right? They put a stick, a husk, and then they start rubbing, right? So we see this, there's a learning that takes place, right? So nature, Mother Nature, which is powered by this cosmic intelligence or symphony, starts generating, various energy, the building blocks for, our atomic structure, vibrations, atomic structure, proton, neutron, electrons, ultimately forming, key elements on the periodic table, from helium right up to everything else. And when those building blocks slowly started coming together, you started getting complex proteins, complex things, and ultimately life emerged. So we see this evolution of God, or Irul, or the higher, passes through many layers to be part of us. This is why we say samadhi means oneness with the origin, right? So we see this evolution. Why is this really important, right? So this is what Mahans discover. Yes, from that, I know all the things. But the next trick is to go the other way. Is that, yes, I have a body. Now I have to find a way to go back to that atomic level, the, proton level, the light level, the sound, the unarve. So all these processes, whether it's cell will not be able to exist without sound and vibration, the same thing with all the other building blocks. So ultimately, it's the vibration, that string theory, that the whole universe is resonating, and each resonance has its own characteristics, right? They have their own building blocks, electromagnetism, gravity, all those things emerge, from that vibration. So that vibration must be within us too, that primordial vibration. And this is the search that Mahans did. So they transformed themselves as a laboratory of experimentation. They went to the atomic level, they went to the energy level. Ultimately, they came to that vibration, unarvu level. And then they say, okay, let me decipher that unarvu more carefully. More carefully, you see that vibration is the creator taking on different vibrations. So you trace back to that samadhi way where everything just drops, including the vibration. So this is what Kundalini Yoga for me, what my guru taught, putting it to practice. And that leads you to the spiritual compass. It'll show you the direction. There are times that sometimes people sitting down and meditating, they say, oh, I hear the Om in my ears, although I don't see people around me. This is because, when people are praying or meditating, they play, religious songs, they play all, spiritual songs, and that is programmed in us. So we see that, when that happens, we become more and more attuned to the things in us. So if you're attuned to material world, our mind focuses on the material world. If you're attuned to that discovery of who the creator is in the creation process, the mind now understands this and is able to mitigate anything that is outside that boundary. So then the mind becomes more calmer, the mind becomes more truthful, the mind becomes more purified, the mind becomes more and more disciplined to be able to sit down and intensify that introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation. That ritual that we do every day to meditate or to pray eventually helps us to touch that surface. And when we touch that surface, all that acharas also disappear. We transcend to that self-realization, a spiritual pursuit through experiential learning of this divinity. So the cosmic intelligence powers everything in this universe, but to know God, you need to know the creation process. That is why Mahan devoted quite a lot of chapters on creation, evolution, all those things, elements of the universe. So by discovering that, you see that one can move up the value chain to that eros state, that nothingness state. We experience that every day in our deep sleep. We experience that, when we are sedated for a big operation, and ultimately we see that, that Irul or that universal identity is in us. Because our mind is so preoccupied, we are unable to touch that subtle substratum. And the Kundalini yoga that is taught by Mahan teaches one how to lock into that inner vibration that is resonating, right? So this transition from that person to that universal identity is Kundalini yoga, right? Go more into deeper of the Kundalini yoga as I go through the technical details and why it is slowly changing the structure of your mind, your intellect, and also the way you see life. So cosmic intelligence powers everything. It is core to everything. And for the mind not to forget or not realize it, we have to go back to that basic of where all this started. And the Kundalini Yoga, while one can have a theoretical understanding, the Kundalini Yoga, if it's practiced properly, you will actually feel that vibration and your mind will be completely transformed. So we see this, in pretty much a lot of the scriptures, although they don't describe it in the context of, pictures like this. So what we have here is that in the next, so the Kundalini Yoga is actually about unlocking that higher order continuum, which is timeless, dimensionless, that is embedded in us. That Kundalini Yoga helps the mind get into a frequency to tap into that creative process, right? Ultimately leading you to the creator. So this is what the proper Kundalini meditation should teach one. Maybe people are practicing other meditation and for relaxation, but this helps you to log into this vibration, which is the remnants of the origin of our universe. And when we are able to lock into that universal Bhagavan's Gidam, the mind transforms into that. It is no more, good with the time, resources. It becomes more liberal, more free, So this is what that Kundalini Yoga for me at least, it taught me to become quiet, ultimately get back to that higher order state of existence, and you feel so happy, you feel so joyful, your mind becomes more positive, more creative, the intellect become more sharper. The quiet mind and the sharper intellect will help you to discover the creator. So this is the whole. So Kundalini yoga or any other yoga is like a training wheel to help the mind that is continuously, galloping, to quieten it down to a state of that optional thought And then voila, you get that beautiful experience. So this is what I want to cover. I was going to cover Mahan's initiation method on how one understands this cosmic intelligence and the cosmic symphony that is happening in us and the entire universe. How do we lock our mind, focus our mind into the quietude in us, decoupling from that material kind of worry and all those things. When we decouple that, we see that we become more and more attuned to the life force in us. The moment we feel the reverberation of life force, we're actually feeling that string, the vibration, the resonance, right? And that as we go deeper, we go back to that which predates that vibration, which is our material universe, and we go further, we become that transcendental state of existence. So there's a layer that of level of consciousness and experience one experiences if you practice Kundalini meditation intensively. I'm not going to, in the next class, I'll go into more detail on how a person who is the bottom here, very noisy mind, how does Mahan's stage one, so I'll explain the stage one of initiation process, how it impacts the prefrontal cortex, right, which is very important for thinking, alertness, all those things. So I'll cover that in the next class, where the step, Mahan has 3 steps of unlocking the life force, or at least enabling the mind to experience this life force. It's not going anywhere, it's just experiencing that life force. So slowly you see that when you get the glimpses of it, it becomes more and more profound, and ultimately you're on autopilot. So this is the kind of evolution that I will explain in the next class. What stage one means, what does it do? What happens to the mind? What happens to the intellect? Then we do stage 2 and stage 3 of the initiation process, so that you have a very good understanding of that Kundalini, or the life force, or the Bhagwan's Gidam that is embedded core to our being. But because our mind is distracted with the material world, we are unable to harness this. So, and we get lost. We don't have a spiritual compass that guides us. So here it is that, I want to conclude that this Kundalini, or for that matter, other yoga means to be in union with. And this is what I'm showing you. Most human beings, that cosmic intelligence, people pray, meditate for the benefit of the body, material resources and so on. It only can give you up to a certain level of happiness, joy, and enlightenment. To get that full breadth of yoga or meditation, it's not just relaxation, keeping your eyes quiet. It's about experiencing that vibration, the universal vibration reverberating in every cell in your body, right? So, and I'll speak late in maybe the next lecture on the mind is already noisy. How do I tame it down, calm it down, so that when it's calm, the level of awareness increases? So I'm not going to go into detail, because stage 1 itself will take about half an hour to 40 minutes, which I'll cover the next time. But I'm just giving you the DNA of who we are, everything in this universe, including the Creator itself. Sandosham.